in 1981, and I'm gonna focus on corrections. I will tell you what I went to prison for, but I'm not gonna focus on that so much. But in 1981, I went to prison for 12 years, and to show you the sentencing disparity, the two other people that I was involved with, one got 15 months and the other got 2 years. I got 12 years. I was the youngest person. And I went to Green Bay. It was also known at that time as Wisconsin State Reform Court. It was about 1,000 people, and it was old school assault halls. It was single cells at the time. But at the time, they were still really interested in rehabilitation. So they had HVAC, bricklaying, foundry. They had a 2-year college AA degree. They had machine shop, they had welding, they had auto body, they had auto mechanics, they had drafting, they had barbering / cosmetology, they had GED, they had high school diploma, they had a print shop. And because it was mostly young, you know, like you guys, 18 years old, everybody fought. The very first day I was there, listen, I was at 2 fights. And I was like thinking to myself, I have 12 fucking years. You know, the first day, you know. Well, anyways, I jumped in the college program there, and it was urban studies, which to this day I still don't know what it means, but I was grateful for the fact that they would allow us to do something like that through UWP. And I spent 2 years there, and at the time, Wisconsin's prison system was really small. There was only 3,500 people in the whole system, out of 4 major institutions: Green Bay, Will Pond, Kettle Moraine, and Fox Lake, and they had a series of small camps. So just remember, 1981, 3,500. After 2 years, I was transferred to Kettle Moraine, and that was really small. That was like 450. And it was an old boys' school. They had a swimming pool, they had cross-country skiing in the winter, because they just had all this equipment for going to boys' school. But they also, too, had a bunch of rehabilitation programs and vocational programs. They had foundry, welding, again, college, GED, high school diploma, auto mechanics. And they probably had more of them, but it was all single cell. There was only like 55 people in each building. And then after I was there for about 6 months, they sent me to Winnebago. I was only there for a week, and then they sent me to Oak Hill. And Oak Hill is in Oregon. It is south of Madison. And it's an old girls' school. And actually, it was really beautiful. I'm not gonna lie. It was minimal. There's no fence, you know. And after 6 months, I convinced them that they should let me go to UW-Madison, and they did. So every morning, they took me to UW-Madison, and every day they brought me back. It wasn't easy, you know. But it was the fact that I could go to a school that my father was paying for at the time. The buildings were stone. They had very small education programs. They had GED, high school diploma. They had a 7-Up bottling program. They did have work release. Because I was the clerk for social services, there were very few people at work release, like 4. And then when school release, it was me and 2 other guys. And one was Ronald Preedy. Ronald Preedy is famous because he did a double homicide and he got 16 years for it. But I went to UW-Madison for 1 semester. When winter break came, they gave me a job in the records office. And it was just putting records together. But the thing was, I'd read them. And he mentioned before the pre-sentence investigation. And the pre-sentence investigations are really interesting because they are all inclusive. They have everything in there. And the one thing I was learning right away, that a lot of the dudes that I was hanging out with were in there were for sexual assault of children. And unfortunately, it was their own kids. And I mean, that kind of shocked me. I was young, I was like 20 years old at the time. But the fact that fathers could do this to their children, I just didn't understand it. But anyways, I made it through 1 semester at UW-Madison in the car battery case, which just means I got to fight with somebody, and I look less beat up than him. So they sent me back to Green Bay. Yeah. I was paroled on August 13th, 1985, after doing 4 years, 3 months. And parole's a misnomer. I did not get paroled by the parole board. I did my mandatory release. At the time, Wisconsin's sentencing structure is if you had 6 years or more, you were doing half time. But after 6 months, you sought a parole board. And they could let you go or they couldn't, but most of the time they didn't let you go. But I got out of prison and I moved back to Madison and re-enrolled at UW-Madison. And then unfortunately, I got involved in the same thing I was doing before. But after going across the country on a Harley, I turned myself in on 12/1/1986, and I made a plea bargain for 10 years to Pfost, Berkeley. Judge Dennis J. Berry gave me 20 years. Wisconsin, they don't have to honor the plea bargain. So basically, I went to Waupun with 20 years for 2 counts of burglary. I was doing the same amount of time as somebody who was in there for second-degree murder, first-degree sexual assault. They didn't care at Waupun that I was in there for 2 counts of burglary. I still had to do that time. But in the late 80s, you guys might have heard something called crack. Well, it became an epidemic, and the murders in Milwaukee went from like 50 or 60 a year, they went to 180, they went to 200. And the fact of the matter was, all these first-degree murders were coming in, they had to make room for them, so they started out a new program, and it was called this. Now, I was in Waupun for 6 years, and Waupun's an old-school prison too. Not nice, it was built in 1889, I think that's on a 1-cell hall. Toilets would always break down, but I had a single cell. In prison, that's very, very important. But after 6 years, well, I tried everything to get rid of that 20 years as I could. My father even hired Jerry Boyle. At the time, he was probably one of the best defense attorneys in Wisconsin. I think he's overhyped.
Well, he defended Dahmer.
And he also got Mark Schumer off.
Yeah.
But he took me back in front of Dennis J. Berry, and Dennis J. Berry was like, not no, he was like, hell no. So, anyways, I started this program called this, and I couldn't get out of Waupun to save my life. Because after a while, you're supposed to transfer immediately, you know? But because I had 20 years, and they said something that wasn't true, and you couldn't fight it. They said I was a gang leader. Not only was I not a gang leader, I wasn't even in a gang. Yeah, but how you gonna deal with that, you know? So, you know, I just, you know, bit the bullet, and one day I called home, and my mom got the phone, and she was like screaming. She's like, "You coming home?" I said, "What are you doing?" No, I had applied for a program because I didn't know what it was, but they said I could go home. I couldn't go to Fox Lake because of gang leader, but I could go home. So after 6 years in Waupun, I went home. Most immediately, I got a job at Booker Construction working as a union laborer, making union wages. And it was a good job and it was good pay. And after about 5 or 6 months, someone said, "We'll go back to school." I said, "For what?" I said, "Nursing." So 20 years ago, I was going to school here. 20 years ago. But after a year going to school here as a poor student, knowing I had a union card and I could make $16 an hour, you know, I went back to work. But one thing I want to point out the difference between Waupun and Green Bay was, if you got in a fight in Green Bay, you go home for 3 days, right? 3 days still sucks. But you go to Waupun, you go home for 360 days. So you got to ask yourself, how mad are you going to be at a person getting in a fight with them? But sometimes you don't have a choice because they bomb on you, you know? So, anyways, I got in Waupun, I went home, got a job, and then I went to school here. There's a couple things I forgot about Waupun. Waupun wasn't known for its rehabilitation. It was, you guys got license plates on your cars? They didn't make them at Waupun. You see street signs? They didn't make them at Waupun. When you go over to the student center and it says no smoking, at the very bottom of the sign it says Badger State Industries. Badger State Industries is a euphemism for the Wisconsin Department of Corrections, which is actually a good idea because you can put that on an application, job application, if you work for Badger State Industries, which is really important when you know trying to get a job. And you have you know employers there or supervisors that they can call up. But at Waupun they had a sign shop, metal stamping. They only had 2 vocations to the best of my knowledge. That was machine shop and welding, but they did have college and GED. Anyways, I worked for Booker for numerous years, and then my father died, and down the rabbit hole I went. I continued to work for Booker, but I started doing stuff that I wasn't supposed to do. On February 23rd, 1997, I had a standoff with the SWAT team in the scene. And anyway, I'm still mad about that. But the thing was, they chased me all night long, and I ran all night long, and I didn't stop running until I got to California. But when I was in California, I made some really stupid mistakes. instead of being a burglar, what I used to do, I became an armed robber. And, well, anyways, after a high-speed chase in Los Angeles on April 11th, I was arrested. And I got 16 months for the high-speed chase, which is technically called evading. And then, while I was sitting, I went to Wasco State Prison, which is a reception center, which is a euphemism. There's nobody gonna be like, hey, welcome. At Tracy, I saw a quote from Dante's Inferno, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Yeah, and first thing I noticed when I got to Wasco was they had big signs up everywhere that said no warning shot is required. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And it's like, if you get in a fist fight with someone in the Department of Corrections in California, they will shoot you. Not with a block gun, which is, you know, a non-lethal weapon. They will shoot you with a .223. And they were known for doing that. They shot 44 inmates between 1988 and 1994 at Corcoran State Prison. Those 44 inmates were, at one prison, were more than the rest of the country combined. So they were kind of shoot happy. And when I walked up to my cell door opened, and I looked in there, and there was a pretty girl sitting in there, and I was like, oh, this place is co-ed. Yeah. Yeah, that kind of was like, oh. But I can say this about that Sally Pumpkin, even though he was a queen, he was probably one of the best Sallys I had because he explained everything. And I'd done 10 years in Wisconsin, so I thought I knew what prison was about. But no, I was in California, and it was way, way different. First of all, the ethnic groups break down white, black, Mexican, and then the Mexicans break down furthermore into Sureños, Norteños, Paisas, and Bulldogs. Bulldogs are a gang out of Fresno in that area that surrounds. Sureños is just Spanish for Southerner, and Norteños is Northerner. And Paisas means Mexican nationals, undocumented workers. And the fourth ethnic group was others. Asians, American Indians, Pacific Islanders, Middle Easterners. And the thing was, the first thing I was told was, you do not have anything to do with, except with whites and Southerners. And I was like, oh, how do I know what a Southerner is, right? Well, after a while, everybody's got tattoos, and their tattoos identify them for everything they do. People get ink fever when they go to prison in California. They get tattoos from the tips of their toes to the tops of their eyelids and their faces. And I'm just like, how are you going to get a girlfriend with that? Yeah. But anyways, I was at Wasco State Prison for about 2 months, and then they sent me to Avenel. Well, Wasco was a level 4. There are 4 levels in California. 1 is minimum, hardly anybody goes to that. 2 is kind of like medium, minimum. 3 is medium, 4 is max. And then they have something called the SHU, which is Security Housing Unit, which is the hole, but there's 2 holes in California. I'm not trying to confuse you guys, but just let you know what's going on. But when I get to Avenel, they're called 270 design buildings. There's a tower in every building in California. And a guard can stand in that tower with his gun, and the 270 design refers to your vision. So they can see 270 degrees to the building. And anyways, I was at Avenel for a couple months, and they hit me up for this armed robbery in Ventura. I wanted to get it out of the way, and I went back there, and the first time I saw my public defender, he was like, listen, if I can get you a deal for 14 years, 8 months, will you take it? This is the first time I'm seeing my lawyer. And he wants me to take a deal for 14 years, 8 months? I'm like, no, I don't think so. He's like, well, you got to 9 o'clock tomorrow to make your mind up. And he gave me a big stack of discovery and all the casework for 3 strikes, because he said if I didn't take the deal by 9 o'clock the next morning, he was going to strike me out. And I didn't think my Wisconsin charges would count, but everything counts. And in California, as I've taught before in this class, they always hear violent, but there's another 2 words, or serious. And a burglary of an inhabited dwelling is considered a serious offense, and I had 7 burglary convictions, so I was way past the 2 strikes. So after thinking about it for, a couple hours, I took the deal. The one thing I want to say positive about California is they have to honor the deal. It's not like Wisconsin. I've seen dudes just get slammed here. They made a deal for 3 years, and the next thing you know, they're doing 40. And there's nothing you can do. You plead guilty to it, or you plead no contest. Avenel was big. It was 7,600 inmates all living in dorms, and not like the dorms here. There are buildings which 296 men live in, and they're like big barns. And there's only 4 toilets in one urinal. Think about that for a second. But anyways, and each yard is like its own separate prison. They have their own dining halls, their own medical, their own dental, their own education, their own libraries. And almost no personal property was allowed. At the time, you couldn't have TVs, but at any other prison in California, you could have 13-inch TV. But I was only there for a couple months, and the charge went down to Ventura, so I went back there, and I got 14 years, 8 months. Went back to Wasco, and then they transferred me to Avenel again with 14 years, 8 months, and I was on the yard for 9 days. And all of a sudden they said I was a threat to the safety and security of the institution because it was a level 4 and 2 yards, so they threw me in a hole for the next couple months. That was when I was introduced to Nazi lowriders. In California, there's a distinction between a street gang and a prison gang. A street gang in California would be like the Crips or the Bloods, which I'm sure you've heard of. A prison gang is like Nazi lowriders, Aryan Brotherhood, the MA, which is the Mexican Mafia, Nuestra Familia, which is Norteños, Black Guerrilla family. And the thing is, these are all killers. These are straight killers. These are really, really scary people. They did not get in there without killing somebody, you know? And it wasn't like they got to pick who they killed. So anyways, now I got 14 years, 8 months, and they sent me to New Folsom. There's 34 major prisons in California. Someone said I don't like the verbiage one time, but I said, there's 4 prisons you don't want to go to in California. That's New Folsom, that's High Desert, that's Salinas Valley, and that's Pelican Bay. You may have heard of Pelican Bay. That's probably about the worst prison in California because they don't give a fuck. They kill all day long. But when I was at New Folsom, we were locked down pretty much the whole time. There were 4 murders while I was there, and they were all unsolved, and they were really brutal. But those were just the murders. You know, they were trying to kill people the whole time I was there, and I was just like, could you just wait until I'm really flighty. I lose my spot. The white boys had slashed this white Muslim's throat, and we were locked down for that. They didn't even die. But I went up and I was on the yard. I was new. I didn't know. And I asked a couple of woods. In California, whites are referred to as peckwoods. Woods for short, and that's like our word. And they got it tattooed. But I said, why do you slash the Muslim's throat? And he's like, what do you mean, why do we slash the Muslim's throat? He's a white Muslim. What the fuck you think, would? And at that point, I realized I couldn't ask any simple questions anymore. But like I said, I was there for 6 months, locked down almost the whole time. The only thing you're guaranteed when you're locked down is that hopefully they feed you and you get a shower like 3 times a week. You don't get phone calls, you don't get visits, you don't go to canteen, you don't go to yard. You just sit in your cell and listen, I had some really nightmare cellies. I mean, and just stupid too. Do they have cable TV in Wisconsin? But after 6 months at New Folsom, they realized that I really wasn't New Folsom material. So they sent me to Mule Creek, which is a level 4 prison too, but it's not a war zone like New Folsom or the other 3 that I mentioned. Mule Creek was 1,000 men on the yard, and there was 3 yards there, so it was like 3,600. They had a minimum support facility. But it was considered a soft level 4. I mean, people still die, but it wasn't like all the time. But to show you the difference between Wisconsin and California, the 1,000 men that were in the yard, 600 of them were lifers. So they weren't gonna see the parole board for years and years, or even if they weren't, because in California you got something called LWOP, life without parole, and they have it in Wisconsin basically too. Because they make your prison sentence in Wisconsin 9 years before you see the parole board. You really got 90 years in the end. But anyways, the only 2 vocations they had at Mule Creek when I was on A-Yard was GED, dry cleaning, English as a second language, which I always thought was funny because there were a lot of places and there were a lot of people that needed, because you're talking about Asian Rim. You're getting a lot of ethnic people from Pacific and even Russia, and they don't know English. But the thing is, they'll teach them how to speak English, but as soon as they're done with their sentence, they're going to deport them. you know, which I just thought was kind of funny. You know, learn English and then get sent back to Russia. But there were 600 lifers, and they couldn't get jobs because they were close custody. So there was a lot of poor people on the yard. And in prison in California, they're very serious about, you don't steal anything from anybody. You know, you don't sneak thief. You can take something from somebody all day long. They don't have a problem with that. In fact, they kind of encourage that. So if you're not going to fight for yours, they're just going to take everything you got. But one thing I wanted to mention at New Folsom, it was hands-off policy, which meant you couldn't get in a fight with somebody. You had to stab them from a corner. I'm not that mad at them. But anyways, I was on A yard for 2 years, and then I transferred to C yard, which was in the same prison. It was level 3. 3 yard was a lot different. It was a lot cooler. And this is all doubled up cells. You know, you always have a cellie. And I always got the night there, so. Yeah. But they had night yard. They had PIA, which stands for Prison Industry Authority. They had a butcher shop there. It was beef. And they did have a trade program, meat cutting, but it wasn't so much so that you would get out and get a job. It was so that you would help to continue making the hamburger patties and the sausages and the hot dogs and whatnot. But from 1999 to 2005, I was in the same cell, and it overlooked the whole. And I got to see him shoot people. Well, it was better than him shooting me, you know, because it's like I was in like 300-man riots. First of all, you got 150 people coming at you, and they all want to kill you. But then you got like 5 towers on the yard, and they're all shooting too, you know. So someone's trying to kill you no matter what, you know. I'm like, see, at the point I was like, we have never ever crossed the Mississippi. I'll go to St. Paul, but I won't go to Minneapolis. But in California, there were a lot of drugs in the prisons. Not so much in Wisconsin, just a little bit of weed. Drugs were huge in California. Heroin, meth, weed. And the funny thing was, a hypodermic needle, if they caught you with one, they were rigged. One of my friends referred to his as violin. Yeah. But it would get you 6 years in prison. But they didn't care. They just didn't care. In 2001, AR turned to SNY because they were stabbing and killing so many child molesters and rapists. You had to, when you came off that bus, you had to have paperwork. You had to produce paperwork, show it to a shot caller, and if you didn't have paperwork, it was the same as having bad paperwork. In California, they don't call you bad names. They don't call you punk or bitch or anything like that. They're very polite. But you don't have paperwork, they're still going to be polite, but they don't come back and kill you, or at least try to. And unfortunately, you have to put in work. You know, when you get there, you're going to have to do some stuff you don't want to do. And trust me, I got the tattoos to show what I did, and I have a whole bunch more tattoos, but I was like, no, I'm passing on that. Because they make the tattoo ink out of soot from burning stuff. And it looks good right away, but it fades away. In 2 months, it looks like you had it for 300 years. A yard turned SNY. The B yard was always protective custody. There are so many serial killers in California. It just boggles the mind. And there was a whole bunch of them that were sentenced prior to Furman versus Georgia in 1972, where they shut down the Supreme Court, Supreme Court shut down the death penalty. And there was just a small window from 1972 to 1976 that there was no death penalty. And over on BR, they had a bunch of them. Because, not that I'm proud of it, but one day I happened to run into Tex Watson. And I wasn't even supposed to be in the same place as he and him, but Tex Watson was Charlie Manson's right-hand man. And he stabbed a pregnant woman to death. I slapped him up and took his hat. And well, the thing was, the reason I took his hat because I wanted to send it to a friend of mine. And I don't never know what happened to the hat. He's still asking for it. But
is that Sharon Tate that he's dead?
Yes. But I worked for 8 cents an hour for like years, you know, and I was grateful for that because, well, to give you an example, pass this around. These are my IDs from California, and it says privilege card. I don't know what the hell privilege was. Really, I have no idea. These are 2 IDs, and this is kind of interesting because this was the day I was transferred from New Folsom to Mule Creek. And while I was waiting in holding cell before I transferred, they put a couple of Norteños in me, and it's green light. You know, just by the fact of who you are and what color your skin is, you have enemies right away, and they jumped on me, and my eyes kind of busted up, but enough about that. You never have the luxury of not fighting back. In fact, if the white boys see you do something, get slapped or hit, they're going to do something really bad to you. AR turned SNY, D-Yard was always protective custody. After I worked in the regular kitchen, I was a food manager's clerk. I had to order $11,000 in apples for the general population because that was the only fresh fruit we were allowed. They wouldn't let us have citrus because everybody made pruno, which is wine. And you don't need citrus. 60 ketchup packs and a pound of sugar, and that can make a bomb-ass gallon of wine. And in fact, one time, I got caught so many times doing it. That one guard came, took it. They don't make a big deal of it there, they just pour it out. But then later on, he came back and he asked me for my recipe because he's from Mexico and his mom wanted to know how I made it. I thought that was kind of funny. Okay. But you could get in a fight with your same ethnic group. As long as there was no blood, you didn't even go to the hole. You know, think of a pond. If you got in a fight, you didn't even have to get in a fight. If you got punched and the guard saw you scrap and you just trying to put you go to the hole for 360. So, you know, and that's a year. And I would like to say, let's write this down, because this is one out of many people that I met when I was in prison in California. And if you go online, there was a Dateline thing about him. His name is Bruce Lisker. He did 1983 to 2009 for a murder he did not commit. That's how long it took him to disengage from the system. And that was one of many people I met in California. I mean, and he was legitimately innocent. But it's how long it took him to get him out of there. And I wish I could remember the other people's names, but he has a Dateline thing, and if you want to, you can go watch it. He's all over the internet. But in 2004, it was decided to turn all of Mule Creek into a SNY prison, censor teams. A-Yard was already SNY, B-Yard was always protective custody, so they're making the whole prison SNY. So they shipped all 1,000 of them south, and they all lied to us. They said, well, you can pick any prison you want, we're going to send you the first choice you get. And that didn't happen. They sent me back to Avenal. And that was the worst prison in the state. Prison is so bad that the federal government just said, nope, you're shutting it down. That's how bad it was. They built it in a place in Central California where there's a disease, it's called valley fever. It's got a long-ass Latin name. But the thing is, valley fever is a bacteria that lives in the soil that gets into your lungs and can kill you, and it was killing a lot of people. And in 2007, California's medical was so out of order that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals took it over. And they appointed a receiver, and he started making the appropriate changes to prison. 5 inmates were dying every week, not because they were having heart attacks or getting stabbed or they had cancer. They were dying because they couldn't even see a doctor. So they took it over. And the thing is, in California, there's a lot of mentally ill prisoners. Because I was one of them. My diagnosis is panic disorder with agoraphobia, which means fear of crowds. But they gave me, between 1997 and 2013, they gave me all these garbage-ass drugs that had nothing to do with panic disorder. Zoloft, Paxil, Elavil. The only one they ever gave me that worked, and they took that away as soon as it doesn't work yet, was Xanax. So anyways, they would even give you over-the-counter drugs, like Benadryl, because it's an antihistamine. If you take Benadryl, you're tired. But anyways, again, I'm back at Avenal. 7,600 men living on 6 yards, the dorms. And since I've been there in 1997, they even added a building to the yards. So conceivably, you could go outside in a very small area, and there would be 1,300 inmates up there. And none of them liked each other. You know, and every prison in California, there's only, if you're white, you only go certain places. If you're black, you only go certain places. You know, Mexicans, The North and South, they're always going at it. I always felt sorry for the Mexicans in prison in California because they're always locked down. And the thing was, they'd be locked down for 6 months. And what I thought was kind of funny was after that 6 months of being locked down in their cells, when they came out, they were just as white as me. And they would get just as sunburned as me. But they would eventually brown up and stuff. But it's like, and then they have a choice about it. You know, if you're from south of Bakersfield, you're Southern. If you're from north of Bakersfield, you're North Tenure. And it didn't matter if you were actually a gang member, you were associated with that. Anyways, again, I mean, I did mistake earlier. There were 8 toilets in one urinal for 297 men. So in the morning, there'd be like 20, and there were no stalls. There were no stalls at all. I mean, I got the shyest bladder in the world, you know. That was not cool. And also, too, they would stab you on the toilet. Yeah. And if you're living in a dorm and you went to bed and somebody was mad at you, they had no problem stabbing you while you were sleeping. So you always had to think at night, well, I'm good. You know, that, you know, yeah. And it was dirty, just filthy. Overcrowded. I mean, listen, what are there 40 people in this classroom?
44.
44. This would be a dorm in California we all had to live in. Well, we all have to be the same gender, obviously. And there'd be like 2 toilets, and it would be triple bunks. You know? So just think about that for a minute. While I was in California, I was exposed to TB. I didn't actually get it, but I had to take the meds for 6 months. But I did get Hep C. And Hep C will kill you dead, just like TB will. Hep C, they didn't want to treat me for it, so I had to file on them. And finally, I was asymptomatic. I didn't have any of the symptoms of hepatitis C, but I knew it was the virus that was in my system. And so they started treating me, and there's only 2 drugs they give you. It's ribavirin and interferon. And both the other medical applications for either one of those drugs are cancer. And the minute you take interferon as an injectable, and they wouldn't even inject me with it. No, like, here, you do it. And so for the first 4 months, and this was a 6-month program, I was doing it wrong. But they didn't tell me that. But Hep C had 19 side effects. I got 18. The only reason I didn't get the 19th is because I don't have ovaries. And on top of that, they give you Apigen and Epigen, which increase your red blood count and your white blood. Because, listen, I lost like 40 pounds, and it was over. And the thing is, you can't really afford to lose 40 pounds when you're in prison in California because they don't care if you're sick. They don't care if you're on Hep C. You're still going to have to perform if something goes down, and shit goes down all the time. But then the worst thing I got while I was there was, I'm going to say this wrong so somebody can correct me, but MRSA? Say it.
MRSA?
I got MRSA. And it was on this finger, it was just like a little zit. And when I showed it to the nurse, she like backed up. And she got scared. Yeah, so, so when I finally saw a doctor and he cut it out and stuff, dude, he had like full body mask on. And then they gave me an 8-drug cocktail. So not only am I in treatment for Hep C, I got MRSA. But the thing is, I did the 6 months for Hep C, and then I did another 3 years of testing where there was no virus in my system, so I'm cured. Which actually, they were actually really surprised. Because usually the dudes in California, they keep doing what they're doing, they've got them hepatitis C, where there's been tattoos and shooting don't. And also too, with all stabbing going on, you're gonna get blood splashed on you. I mean, one time, I didn't have nothing to do with it, but the Southerners hit a Northerner on the yard, and they cut him from chin to chin. And he ran by and he splashed me on the back with blood, and I was on the yard, and they got the gunners out, and this dude's whispering to me. And I'm like, dude, you stop whispering? Someone stop whispering. You see all these gunners? They don't think we had something to do with it. It's like, you got blood all over your back. I'm like, oh. So as soon as they discovered I had blood on my back, they snatched me up and threw me in a dummy box, which are little tiny, old-fashioned, like, phone booths, right? But after you stand in them for like 20 minutes, everything starts hurting because you can't move. And so I was sitting there for 4 hours, and I finally explained to the yard captain, listen, there's blood on my back. I'm not the baddest dude in the world. I can't slash somebody like that. Logic actually went out. As I mentioned, California Youth Medical was taken over by the federal government in 2007, and it is still being taken over there. But one of the reasons they didn't want to treat my hepatitis C because treatment costs $75,000 to $150,000. And the thing is, anywhere from 60 to 75% of the population in California, there's 180,000 men have hepatitis C. But when I was at Avenel, I got a job in the law library. I'd always been real proactive because they just treated the inmates horrible there. I mean, it didn't matter what. I mean, I had people that came all the way from Wisconsin. Now, I went to school here 20 years ago, I told you that. Most of those friends from 20 years ago came to visit me. But sometimes they wouldn't let them in. So if you got somebody traveling all the way from Wisconsin and they've already been approved on your visiting list and then they don't let them in for some stupid ass reason, I'm gonna get mad. So I started writing institutional appeals. And then when I worked in the law library, I hooked up with a real jailhouse lawyer, Alfonso. And Alfonso taught me how to do everything. And in the beginning, I wasn't very good at it. In the beginning, I never did anything. But I eventually got 2 lifers out. And the thing is, my sister even jammed me up about it. She's like, hold on, what were they in for? And I said, murder. She's like, you just let 2 murders out? I'm like, listen, they've been down for 20 years. They made a plea bargain for 15 years, and all of a sudden the parole board's not letting them go. And they kept saying the murder that they did. Well, that's an unchanging fact. But the thing is, you can't just write a writ. You have to go to the Superior Court, which is like Circuit Court here. Court of Appeal. In California, it's Court of Appeal, not Court of Appeals. They said, you messed me up. The state Supreme Court, and then you got to go to the District Federal Court. So this takes a long time to do this. And these guys have been waiting a long time. But I worked in a law library, and just to show you how off the hook California was, and she doesn't work there anymore, and I'm not putting it out there, but the main law librarian was bringing in everything. When I mean everything, I mean everything. She's bringing in phones, heroin, marijuana, tobacco. She's having sex with an inmate. And then another guard was having sex with another inmate. And I was just there to write writs. I was just like, I wasn't there to witness everything else. But the thing was, they did pay me to keep my mouth shut. They didn't have to pay me anything, but I still did it. I know. But they never got caught. In Wisconsin, they would have been snitched out in 20 minutes. They would have been ratted out. But they got away with this for a long time because the structure in California is so serious. One guy even had made a mistake of saying something about the librarian to another person who was overheard. They almost beat him to death. They put him in a wheelchair. There are some things you just cannot question, and some things you cannot talk about. In 2009, August 25th, I was paroled from California Department of Corrections right to the Kings County Jail. The weight extradition we're seeing for the whole SWAT team, isn't it? I've been filing for a long time to get this whole extradition thing over with. I knew they weren't going to let it go. They were still mad about it. I mean, it was 11 felony charges. But anyways, they tried to appoint me a lawyer. I told the judge, listen, I'm my own lawyer. I waive extradition. So somebody came in a van that said, North Atlantic Extradition Services. I said, you taking me to the airport? And he says, well, no. Well, what are you taking me? To the van. I'm in Central California. Man, California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, Mississippi. We're going south. Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Tennessee again, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, Mississippi, or Missouri again, Illinois, Wisconsin. And we didn't stop at a motel or even a county jail. I was on that van ride. But I'm not going to lie. I just did 12 and a half years in California, so I got to see a lot of the country. And I didn't mind about it. It was a window van, and they were really nice. When I got back to Wisconsin, Meeks was the DA, and he made me a since I take friendship so seriously, I had all my friends write to the judge, Charles Constantine, who I saw in the Department of Motor Vehicles a couple weeks ago. And he listened to those letters, and he gave me 8 years. And I went to Dodge. And there I discovered he couldn't give me 8 years, because the charge only carried 5 years. So I wrote a writ, and I didn't hear anything about it. Well, I went from Dodge, I went to Stanley Correctional Institution. The only vocational classes they have in Wisconsin now is janitorial at Stanley. And it was sad, because if you guys heard about all the stuff I read earlier on, and the thing about janitorial is, what's the one thing to give janitors? You give a big key ring. You think they're going to give a convicted felon a big key ring? No. So they're training these dudes to be janitors, and the chance of them getting a job as a janitor is very small. Because nobody's going to trust somebody with the keys to your whole building. But I was there, and Stanley was like Eau Claire. The whole 12 and a half years I was in California, I just couldn't wait to get back to Wisconsin, because maybe I might go to a senior correctional institution. The whole family was around here and friends. No, they sent me to Stanley. So I was at Stanley for 2 years, and then I was actually sober for a while. And then somebody offered me a joint, and I took it, I smoked it, and then he got caught with it, and then he bragged me up. So the whole thing in California, they won't say shit about you for nothing. But in Wisconsin, they'll sell you the marijuana and then tell on you. And it was my first ticket for lack of a better word, rules violation report. And they gave me 120 days in the hole.
Oof.
I'm like, so anyways, and then he transferred me to Jackson Correctional Institution, which is in Black River Falls. And I saw the parole board, because you are sentenced under the laws that are in effect. Because the crime happened in 1997, there was still parole in Wisconsin. They did away with it in 1999. They went to truth and sentencing. But since I committed my crime in 1987, I still saw the parole board. So I saw the parole board, and she said something that wasn't true. She wasn't going to parole me anyways, but I knew I was right. And it's never a good way to start the parole board off, is arguing with the parole board people. They take offense to that. But I know I was right. So she postponed the hearing. She ordered an amended judgment and conviction, and when I got it, instead of going home on Christmas Day 2014, I was going home on Christmas Day in 2012. And anyways, I came home on Christmas Day in 2012 with $139 in my pocket. My mom was living in an assisted living center. My sister lived in Cedarburg, and my meds ran out in 30 days. I went to 9 different health care providers, no meds. I don't want to crappy drugs anymore. But the fact is, which should be important about this, is what about the schizophrenic that's out of prison who can't get his meds? I think that's one person who should really get meds. I'd just like to say at this point, since a lot of you guys are going into corrections, I would like to invite you, any of you that are interested in going to Formers Anonymous. Formers Anonymous is a 12-step program that was started by Sandy Rangel right back there. And if you want to see people who get out of prison that are really working their ass off to change, and you guys are going into corrections or law enforcement, you guys should take the opportunity to come. The only thing Sandy asks is this is a 12-step program, and you respect the anonymity that's involved in it. I also got involved in the 11 by 15 campaign. I did want to show a couple pictures, and I know we're running out of time. But if you just pass these around, my sister read me about. She told her son, my nephew, she's like, I only have Polaroid pictures with Charlie. Yeah, really? Okay. But I got involved in the 11 by 15 campaign, and I'm a volunteer for Seeing the Faith Coalition. 8 of us got out last year. 6 are back in, and 2 are dead. One was a heroin overdose, and the other broke his neck falling down the stairs, intoxicated. But the other fact is the other 6 went back. And nobody gets out of prison wanting to go back to prison. It's just the way it works out. And the thing is, now they don't have any parole, and they don't have any vocational programs. What are you supposed to do when you're in there? Just do straight time? obviously, I'm not talking about certain crimes, but I'm talking about economic criminals like myself. And one other person was supposed to show up today, but it's snowing and he's coming from Madison, so he couldn't make it. But I wanted him, because he's been out for 3 years, and his background mirrors mine exactly. Anyways, I had a lot of stuff I wanted to bring. Law books. And there's other stuff I wanted to show you, but I didn't know that I was going to talk so much. My rules from parole, they don't offer you anything else. I don't know where I got that from, but I just thought it was kind of cool. I have spoken to Robin Voss. He's probably the second most powerful politician. I didn't think he heard what I said, but then I found out that they are creating a pilot program in 4 counties that would assist inmates in signing up for badge of care. I spoke in front of the Joint Finance Committee in April.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I didn't think they heard what I said either, but then I got the Milwaukee Journal, and the last paragraph talks about basically what I just told you guys on one of the testimonials from Charles Pfost. So there are a lot of people like myself that are out here that are actually really trying to do good. So, you know, I get kind of freaked out when I see dudes that I know that do really crappy shit, you know. But I have no control over them. The only thing I have control over is myself. And the fact of the matter is I got out after 16 years. They didn't give me a lot of tools to work with, but a lot of people took interest in me. And hopefully, if you guys are going into corrections or into law enforcement, that you would too take the time to care about somebody. Because if you don't care, who else is going to care? The reason I do this speaking to these various politicians is because nobody else will do it. You know, I mean, I just kind of fell into it, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to, you know, share my story with you guys. And I wish, you know, I had so much stuff this weekend to go over with. I hope you understand that, you know, it's not as cut as dry as it looked. You know, there's theory and practice. I'm not the theory, I'm the practice. You know.
Now, we, of course, have class on Wednesday, which is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, as a little extra added incentive for you to come to class on Wednesday. Charlie, why don't we have you take the Q&A on Wednesday? Okay. To be part of the class period. I know we didn't have time for Q&A, and I think you guys have some